right, good morning, community. How's everybody doing? Ooh, love it, love it, love it. Like, you're liking that warm weather, aren't you? Are we gonna get 70s today? I think it's gonna be close. We're crossing our fingers for it. How many of you are thinking about summer vacations already? Yeah? I know the warm weather kind of does it. I got a question here about summer vacations, and here's a destination. Has anybody ever been to the Bridger-Teton National Forest out in Wyoming? Anybody been out there? Boom, boom. Anybody else? We got a few. I've got a chance to kind of travel a lot of places coast to coast, but I've never actually been to the Grand Tetons. Here's actually a picture. Look at this. I just think it looks breathtaking. Does that look awesome? 600 miles of hiking trails, 13,000 foot tall mountains. I mean, just what a great time. I was doing a little bit of homework on the Bridger Wilderness, and I came across something that cracks me up. Check this out. Apparently, there is a suggestion box located at the base of the mountain where hikers and mountain climbers can leave suggestions on how to improve the experience. Okay? Gotta know what's coming. Here are a few of their suggestions on how to improve the experience. Let me give you a few of them. Number one, could you please avoid building trails that go uphill? These are actual suggestions left by real life people, okay? Here's the second one. I think escalators would help in steep uphill sections. This one maybe is my favorite one. Here's a third of my favorite one. There are just too many rocks in the mountains. I'm never coming back. I've had it with this place, right? And I was reading those, it's kind of a reminder to me that, you know what, we don't like hard things, do we?
No.
I mean, we don't like struggle. We don't like pain. Let me just make sure I'm clear on that. Is there anybody here who wants to go like, I love tough times, I love suffering, I love pain? Any takers? Going once, twice. Nobody. Not one of us. But there's just one problem about that. Pain is inevitable. Every person either gone through it or will have to go through it in our life. And it might be something that you brought onto yourself. It may be a poor decision that you made, and now it's got you down a path you never, ever intended to go. And it's painful. It might be a situation brought on by somebody else. And the pain is the result of somebody else's bad decisions, their poor choices, but you kind of have to live with it. Or it might be one of those things where life just hits you with circumstances that are beyond anybody's control. And it hurts. And here's the truth. The truth is, suffering is it's a reality of life. Every one of us goes through stuff. But here's the deal. It's how we get through what we're going through that really matters. It's how we actually respond to the circumstances. Those will set the trajectory for the rest of our life and even our relationship with God. Now, over the years, scholars and theologians, they've always talked about our spiritual journey in kind of stages or phases. And there's a lot of different names, but here's what we're going to do. During this series, we're going to talk about 3 different stages that everybody goes through in their spiritual journey. And I think if you hang your hat on these will be very helpful. Stage number 1 is what we're going to call a confident faith. There's a whole bunch of us in this room. We recently found our way back to God. It's a stage that this confident faith can last for a long time. We'll even actually come back to it eventually. But during this stage of confident faith, we're excited. It feels like life is finally working the way we hoped it would. Prayers are getting answered. God's responding to our obedience with blessing. We're feeling joy. We feel gratitude. Confident faith. But no matter how long this season of confident faith, inevitably it'll lead to this next season of challenged faith. And suddenly everything that seemed to work so well during the confident faith season is not the same or doesn't seem the same anymore. And it feels like maybe God's not hearing my prayers. They're like bouncing off the ceiling. Obedience doesn't seem to get the same kind of response. Doubts begin to creep up. Questions emerge. And we long for the days of confident faith when we were just, so unstoppable. I remember when we very first started Community Christian Church. Many of you have heard me tell this story. There were just a handful of college friends. We were all in our early 20s. We had no people. We had no money. We had no clue. All right? Despite all that, we got off to a great start. God just kind of blessed it ridiculously. In fact, we even got kind of some national attention for some things that we were doing. And it was like the whole church, that first year, the whole church was kind of in this confident faith stage. And then about 12 or 18 months into it, the newness wore off. I think we hit another stage. In fact, I remember one weekend, you enjoyed the band this morning, right? I mean, this is so awesome. Imagine if the whole band came to me today and goes like, I quit. That'd be a bad day, right? You're going like, what? He's going, I quit too. I'm not coming to hear you, Dave, right? Well, I remember a year into the whole band quit. And part of it, I look back and I think I just burned them out. I ended up doing everything. The whole band just quit. And there were other people who came to me and said, no, I'm done. And there were people who I thought, we started, I'm 25, I'm thinking I'm going to do this till I'm 75, we're going to do 50 years together. 12 months in, 18 months in, they quit. And it was for me, I was kind of like, man, God, I made a lot of sacrifices for this. God, this doesn't feel like you're answering my prayers. It was like a season of my faith was being challenged. Let me ask about you. Maybe there's circumstances right now in your life that are challenging your faith. And when you see the title of the series, How to Get Through What You're Going Through, let me ask you this. What is it today? Identify it, okay? This is going to help you. What is it that you're going through? If you remember a couple weeks ago, we asked you, we were in the middle of our Finding Your Way Back to God series, and we asked you to fill out these cards and say, finish the sentence, God, I really need your help with. And we had hundreds and hundreds of cards, and with just real stuff. Real stuff we're going through, like, and we've been praying about these as a staff, for you, with you. It says, God, I really need your help with feeling full. And not just from alcohol, not just from men, but by your love. Someone else wrote, God, I really need your help with finances and find a job. Things are starting to feel very desperate. Someone else wrote this, God, I really need your help with dealing with the pain of my wife leaving me. Someone else, and this is probably like, this had to be, I'm guessing, a 4 or 5-year-old, just by that, maybe a little older, maybe 5 or 6, 7, somewhere there by their hand raised, just a little kid said, God, I need your help with, very simply put, people being nice to me. Someone else wrote, God, I need your help with, and just put in one word, everything. In the past week, I lost my job, I lost my home, I lost my girlfriend, and I'm feeling all by myself. What are you going through? So here's the deal. This season of challenged faith, okay? It has the potential then, though, to take us into the next stage that we call living faith. Let me describe a living faith before we get there. Living faith is this deep and lasting kind of faith that remains strong in the middle of the most difficult circumstances. And I think all of us, we want that kind of faith. We want to have the kind of faith that says, you know what, no matter what, I'm going to be steadfast. And I will feel that peace, and I will feel that hope, no matter what life brings my way. But here's the thing. The only way to develop a living faith is to journey through the challenged faith stage. Take a look at this again. The only way, okay, to have a living faith is you have to go through, are you following me, the challenged faith stage. And ultimately, it will bring you back to a confident faith. And so during this series, what we're going to do is we're actually going to journey through the challenged faith. We're not going to avoid it. We're not going to circumvent it. We're not going to go around it. The question is, how do I get through what I'm going through? And there's a story from the Old Testament we're going to use throughout the series. And the Israelites are in a situation where, as God's children, are living in brutal slavery to their Egyptian masters. I mean, they're being mistreated. Try to step into this. They're being abused. Their lives are brutally hard. And together they're asking each other, how are we going to get through what we're going through? How will we get through what we're going through? We pick up the story, and it's a book that gives us a historical account of these real-life incidents. In Exodus chapter 3, God chooses one of their own, a man named Moses, to lead them out of Egypt. In Exodus, it says that Moses was actually out tending the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro, and he comes upon this amazing sight. Some of you remember this story. He comes on this amazing sight. It says in Exodus chapter 3, verse 2, there was an angel of the Lord that appeared to him in flames of the fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. All right, this is a pretty freaky sight, right? Suddenly this bush just combusts into flames, but it just keeps burning and burning and burning and burning. Now, throughout the Bible, fire has actually been kind of a symbol of God's presence, and that might have been something that Moses picked up on. So what I would have done if I would have saw a bush that's set on fire and then just keeps burning and burning, I would have been backing off, right? But Moses leans in. As he leans in, he actually hears God speak to him. And God says this, Moses, I've seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down and I'm going to rescue them from the land of the Egyptians, and I'm going to bring them out of that land into a land of spacious land, a land of flowing with milk and honey. So now, Moses, I want you to go. I'm sending you to the Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Okay, there's a whole lot of stuff happening right there. But one of the things I definitely, for our purposes, want you to notice, okay? I want you to notice how the people of God respond to their suffering here. I want to go back to chapter 3, verse 7. I'm going to put it on the screen here. Look at this. It says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out. Okay, I want you to actually talk back to me, okay? I know a lot of times I talk and ask questions that are rhetorical and you don't really ever answer. But this time, answer me, okay? Okay, here's the question. How did they respond in their suffering? Help me out.
Crying out.
Exactly right. They cried out. I want that to lodge in your brain and your heart. Don't miss this. In the middle of their suffering, in the middle of their pain, in the middle of their struggle, they cried out to God. It says, if we go back and look at that whole text, and being the loving Father he is, he sees his people. Let this get personal now. He sees his people, he hears their cries, and he feels a deep concern for them, and then he pledges to rescue them. The same Father sees, hears, and is concerned both for you and for me during our struggles, our pain, and our suffering. This is not just some ancient story. This is a real-world example of how God loves his people, enters into their struggle, enters into their suffering, and how he will get you through what you're going to go through. Or maybe what you're going through. Now, if we keep moving, because there's more to this, later in Exodus 13, we see God actually does. He intervenes. He responds to the cries of his people. Moses leads the Israelites out of slavery. But here's something interesting. I want to point this out. Check this out. It says, chapter 13 now, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. God instead led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. I mean, if you just read this for the first time, you're kind of going like, hold it. Did God not download the latest in Google Maps? Right? I think he's lost. He's not going the fastest way here. This doesn't feel like a rescue at all. But it might feel familiar. Don't our lives sometimes feel like that? Don't we sometimes find ourselves in a place that doesn't look like I'm being rescued? This doesn't feel like I'm being rescued. I mean, we cry out to God in our circumstances, and they may change, but we still find ourselves traveling down a road that's nothing. This is not at all like I intended. And see, here's what you need to know. That's exactly what it's like in that season of challenged faith. Are you with me? Are you with me? That's exactly what it's like in the season of challenged faith. Yes, God, he is at work. He's at work right now. Trust me on this. And it may feel like your prayers aren't being answered. You may doubt kind of even God's goodness and his intentions because it doesn't feel like a rescue. But if we continue the story, a whole bunch of things begin to happen on this what appears to be a detour. On that desert road, some incredible, miraculous experiences begin to happen. For example, let me just list some. God leads them, it says, by a cloud by day and by a pillar of fire by night. That had never happened before in history. They got to experience that. They also got to see the Red Sea miraculously part, walk across on dry land, and then come back together and destroy their enemy. They got to see salt water turn into fresh drinking water to quench their thirst so they have something to drink. All these miraculous things began to happen on this desert road in a way that didn't seem like a rescue at all. But if we continue on, the same group of people, they respond to this next season of challenged faith. Look at this in Exodus chapter 16. It says this, in the desert, the whole community, they grumbled. Say that word after me. Grumbled. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. That's Moses' brother. The Israelites even said, they said to Moses, hey, listen, Moses, if only we died at the Lord's hand in Egypt. Things started to look better back in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat. We ate all the food that we wanted. But you brought us out of the desert to starve the entire assembly to death. And it's kind of remarkable after everything that's happened, after all these great things they've seen God do, They're now on the desert road, and they begin to grumble. They complain. They complain about where they are and what they don't have. I want you to notice this. What you have here is you have one group of people, but two very different responses. In Egypt, what do? They cry out to God. And once they get in the desert, they begin to complain. And crying out and complaining, those are two very different things. See, a complaint is kind of this verbal raid against injustice. And it's kind of like pointing your finger and saying, you know what? I deserve better than this, God. But a cry out is this deep kind of lament. It's a plea for help in the midst of whatever it is that we're going through. And here's the difference in the two. And think about this when you're going through what you're going through. The difference is probably one word. The word is trust. When we cry out, when we're going through hard times, we cry out. The crying out is like expressing this determination to trust God. God, in the middle of my pain, in the middle of my hurt, in the middle of my sorrow, in the middle of my disappointment, I am going to trust you, that you see me, that you hear me, that you are concerned with me, and I'm trusting that you'll respond what's best. I'm trusting. That's a crying out. A complaint becomes almost lethal to God's trust. Because a complaint is this declaration that, you know what, I know better. I know better. Let's start doing it my way. Here's the bottom line. Every one of us are going to face difficult seasons in that challenged faith season. And let me just ask you again, what is it today that has you feeling lost in the desert? Maybe disappointed, disillusioned. Maybe questioning your faith. And it might be a relationship that turned out nothing at all like you thought it would. Maybe your desert is all about unanswered questions. So much of life doesn't make sense. And you just keep going, why? Maybe it has to do with your health. And your very future is in doubt. Or for some of us in this room, it's about a loss. I mean, a severe loss that seems so senseless. And see, we have two possible responses. Some of you may know the name Rick Warren, Rick and Kay Warren. Rick Warren is a best-selling author of Purpose-Driven Life. He's also the pastor at Saddleback Church. And, over the last several years, has been a friend and was kind enough to actually, if you saw on the front of John and I's book, Find Your Way Back to God, he endorsed it. And here's the point I want to make. 2 years ago, he suffered the devastating loss of his 27-year-old son, Matthew. Matthew committed suicide after a long battle with mental illness. I happened to be at Saddleback Church the first weekend that he came back to speak to his church. And yeah, that's a picture from that weekend of him and Kay. And I'll never forget what Rick said. He said many things, but one of them in particular. He said this. He said, I have cried. And you can imagine this. I have cried every single day since Matthew died. But that crying out is actually a good thing. Grief is a good thing. It's the way we get through the transitions of life. And then he actually quoted from the prophet Isaiah, and he said, here's a verse that I continue to lean on. He said, when you go through deep waters, this is a promise from God, I will be with you. When you go through the rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. And what some of us need to know is that it's okay, it's even good to cry out to God. That's what he wants. Brene Brown is an American scholar, author, public speaker, and she's spoken extensively on the topic of pain and vulnerability. And if you haven't watched her TED Talk, it's one of the most watched talks in history. Just remarkable. Well, she was researching something she called wholehearted life. And she experienced this desert season of her own. And while going through this desert season, she went into intense therapy and actually found herself turning to the church and turning back to God. But what she learned in the middle of this challenged faith season, I mean, it actually really spoke to me. And I just wanted to play this clip of her during an interview. And I think it'll help you too.
My return to faith was definitely around that breakdown. That's when I went, but I went for the wrong reasons. I really went because I'm like, this is hard and this hurts. And in all the midlife unraveling books, they say go back to church. That's what everybody does. So I went back to church thinking that it would be like an epidural, like it would take the pain away. Like I would just replace research with church. And then church would make the pain go away. And then, I write in this book I'm working on right now that it was, faith in church was not an epidural for me at all. It was like a midwife who just stood next to me saying, push. It's supposed to hurt a little bit. I thought faith would say, I'll take away the pain and discomfort. But what it ended up saying is, I'll sit with you in it. And I never thought until I found it that would be enough. But it's perfect. It's just, I don't feel alone in it anymore. And I don't feel like I did growing up where it was a lot of magical thinking. Like it was more like there's a reason for everything. If something tragic happens, it was supposed to happen. And I had a mom who was really, very union, very we had a horrible loss in our neighborhood growing up, and a woman died. And her son was killed in an accident in her home, and then she was diagnosed with cancer shortly thereafter. And at the funeral, they said something when this little boy died, I think he was a toddler, said something like, and maybe it was in upper elementary school, said, this is not a time to grieve. That's selfish. This is a time to celebrate because, this child with God. And that just pissed me off. I just couldn't even make sense of that. And then on the way home, my mom said, I just want to be really clear with you that this is not a time to celebrate, that if you're sad, that's okay. And then she said, and I get really emotional talking about it, she said, because be assured that God is grieving today too. And I was like, huh? She goes, God's weeping too. And I was like, well, that changes everything. My straightforward faith is basically, I believe God is love. And it makes total sense to me that Jesus would have to be the Son of God because people would want love to be like unicorns and rainbows. And so then you just send Jesus and people go, oh my God, love is hard. Love is sacrifice. Love is, eating with the sick. Love is breaking bread with people that, love is trouble. Love is rebellious. Love is, and so I was listening to this Leonard Cohen song and it said, love is not a victory march. Love is a cold and broken hallelujah. And to me, that made sense of that. That totally, I got it. That, when I listened to it, I'm like, love is not easy. Love is not like hearts and bows. Love is very controversial, really.
I think what we so want is we so want God to kind of just step into our pain, lead us out of the desert, and just make it all go away, right? I mean, let's be honest. Isn't that what we want? That's what I want. Just make it go away. And sometimes he does. Seriously, sometimes supernaturally he does. Sometimes. But I want you to know this too. Every time, all the time, what he says is, I will sit with you in your pain. I will walk with you through the desert. If you cry out to me, I promise to be there. We're going to have a time of communion. And see, in the communion, you're going to have a chance to take the piece of bread. Go ahead and take that bread and hold it. It's a reminder of the body. You're going to have that chance to take that cup. Go ahead and take that cup. It's a reminder of the blood. Hold it. As you hold those two, Jesus is saying, you know what he's saying? I know pain. I know suffering. And if you cry out to me and receive me, I will be with you. I will grieve with you. I will help you get through whatever you're going through. We invite every one of you to participate in this. Desha's going to come forward, and if you would, just go ahead and take the envelopes, hold on to them, and we'll take them together after the song.